If you were to approach any experienced crocheter and ask them if you can look inside their crochet bag, 100% of the time, you're going to find some sort of measuring tool, whether that be a soft measuring tape, a retractable measuring tape, or some kind of hard ruler or hard measuring device. They're going to have something in their bag to measure their project with. And that is why I am adding a measuring tool into the Getting Started Must-Haves series, because you're going to be using the measuring tool all the time. Crochet blankets are the #1 most popular crocheted item. They just are. But making sure that you stay dimensionally on track with your blanket is super important. It's super vital. Making sure that the width is on track consistently and making sure that the length of your blanket is on track to meet blanket dimension. And this is one thing that I think a lot of brand new people omit, or they skip the step of measuring out their blanket and they just go and they end up with a really wonky shaped blanket. It's very common, and I'm just trying to save you from that mistake right off the bat. Find out the dimension that your blanket is required and then measure it out and make sure you're staying on dimension. You'll be so happy you did. But not even just a blanket. If you're making granny squares and you're making a bunch of them and you want to make sure that each granny square is the same size, so that way everything aligns beautifully and evenly. Or if you're making a purse and you want to make sure that the strap it's not too long or too short, or you're making just anything, a garment for somebody, and you want to make sure that it's going to fit them. You're always going to want to stay on track with your dimensions. The other thing to take into consideration with measuring tools is that they include both inches and centimeters, because depending on where we live in the world, here in the United States we measure things in inches and feet. However, in other places in the world they measure things by centimeters or meters. So if you're following a pattern, it may specify both dimensions, or it may only specify centimeters or inches, and being able to have some type of measuring tool so that way you can decipher that information or even figure that out for other people. If you are writing a pattern and you want to help them out by giving both inches and centimeter measurements, it can be very helpful to have some kind of measuring tool that has both types of information. There are actually 3 different types of measuring tools you may encounter. The first measuring tool would be the rigid ruler. The rigid ruler is fantastic when measuring gauge, such as the number of stitches within a certain amount of space and the number of rows that are within a certain amount of space. This information is extremely helpful when we talk about swatches, which is another video altogether. But there is something about having that rigid ruler you can place on your work, and it stays flat, it stays still, and allows you to very simply count the number of stitches or the number of rows without having to fuss with like a loose measuring tape, making sure it stays put and stays flat. The second measuring tool would be the loose tape measure. The loose tape measure is amazing for any crocheter because it can measure around something, opposed to a rigid ruler that is straight only. The loose tape measure can measure around your head, so that way you can make the right beanie size for somebody. Or a strap, that way you can make sure the strap is hitting exactly where the person wants it or you want the bag to hit. Or it can measure a blanket width dimension or length dimension. There are so many amazing things that a loose tape measure can do that a rigid ruler cannot do. And the other benefit is how long a loose tape measure can be opposed to the rigid ruler. The rigid ruler, the longest it could possibly be is a yardstick measurement, 3 feet 36 inches. That's it. Whereas this can measure all the way. This one I have right here measures all the way to 4 yards or 144 inches long. That's pretty long. Oh my gosh. The only downside to a loose measuring tape is there's no retraction, so you're left having to wind up this mess. The third measuring tool I can talk about is the retractable loose measuring tool. Now this is going to be fantastic because it has all of the incredible benefits as the loose measuring tape, where it can measure around things. The difference is it can only measure up to 60 inches. That's as much as it's going to give you. But it does have the retractable feature where if you push a button, it will feed the measuring tape back into the dispenser without you having to manually roll anything up, and it takes a snap. The only thing you want to be careful with is making sure you slowly feed the retractor back in so it doesn't snap back and break anything. There aren't very many different types of measuring tools out there, but the ones that are available are great. In fact, I would recommend any absolute beginner crocheter to have the rigid measuring tool, such as the ruler. You really only need a 6-inch long ruler. You don't need the full foot long ruler to get your gauge count. A 6-inch long ruler would be perfect to count your gauge. And again, counting gauge will help you with your swatches, which will give you so much incredible information. And again, I'll go over swatches in another video. But just knowing your stitch count within a certain given area and the number of row count you have in a certain given area will give you so much information. The other tool that I think all absolute beginner crocheters really need is that loose measuring tape. You can choose if that loose measuring tape is that really, really long measuring tape or the retractable measuring tape. They both have their pros and cons, and depending on the type of project that you are dominantly going to be making, you pick which one is going to work best for you. All right. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate you taking a second to listen to all things measuring and the importance of a measuring tool in your pocket when it comes to getting started with crochet. If you haven't yet, check out the other videos in my Getting Started series, the must-haves. Check out what I say, what I recommend, and just be prepared to have the best crochet experience possible. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you with my next video. Bye, guys.